Welcome to the Catholic Mom Book Club, the Winter Book Club, and we're talking these 4 weeks about in the trenches, finding. Speaking of in the trenches, I hear one now. Finding
Yes.
God through parenting littles. Parenting littles. I parent bigs, and it's kind of been interesting to read, to look at how things change and don't change depending on the age of your child. But today we're going to continue our conversation with author Kelsey Gillespy and her editor, Courtney Saponaro. And we're looking at chapter 3, Who Are You? And of course, as we've been doing the whole time, we're letting Kelsey, easy for me to say, just kind of drive our ship today, or just we're really going to hand over the reins to her because she's got some questions. And these questions, by the way, as she's asking Courtney and I, we really want you as well to share your thoughts in the chat in the comments. This is part of the beauty of doing an online book club, is that we get to interact. It's not just Kelsey and Courtney and I chit-chatting, which we have enjoyed immensely. I'm not going to lie. But we're so thrilled that you come with us and get to be part of our morning talking about In the Trenches from Pauline Books and Media. Kelsey and Courtney, welcome.
Thank you so much for having us again.
My pleasure. Our pleasure. Catholic Mom's pleasure. So let's dive in. Part 3. Who are you? Tell us about this part.
Well, first off, as much as I'm digging like this angelic, I don't know if you guys can you guys see that? There's
lovely.
A window right here. Okay, I'm like, oh, the angels are shining down on me, but I'm gonna like turn because that's kind of distracting. So I'm just gonna do. There's the window. Okay.
I thought it was lovely that the Holy Spirit decided to join us.
I know, right? That was kind of great, but also I'm not an angel in any way. So, okay. So first of all, this section, is this better or is this worse?
Yes,
okay. No, it's fine.
It's fine.
This section, Who Are You? I'm a psych major, and so I get like really nerdy about psych things. So I really enjoyed putting this section together because it ended up being this exploration of self that I find very fun, and it's kind of like a big, I don't know, spiritual personality test in a way to discover one's own self through this section. So I really enjoyed getting to do that. Courtney, thanks for letting me nerd out on you and do all that stuff. But something that I think it was really important actually to put this section in, because for moms, especially for moms of littles, it seems as though this is a time when people either they think they have to or they just do it without thinking at all, but they end up losing their identity. They ended up losing their sense of self because they're just so busy taking care of all of the people and all of the things that need to be taken care of. And it was so funny because a lot of times when I would ask moms like how they're doing, their answers were always so others focused, right? Mm-hmm. And so I'd be like, hey, how are you doing? And they'd be like, well, Susie started karate and Timmy had a cold and my husband's been away for work. I'm like, cool. So like, how about you? Like, how are you doing? And then they would be like,
oh my gosh, that is so astute. As you're saying that, I'm thinking, all the women I know who answer that way, and even myself, I'll tell you all about my family and my job, but I don't tell you about me personally. Kelsey, I love that.
Guilty as charged. Yeah, I did the same thing, which is why it was such an eye opener to me, because for a long time it was just normal, right? You'd be like, oh, really? Well, how is Susie liking karate? And is Timmy feeling better? Like, you didn't really care. But eventually I realized, oh my gosh, like the person I asked about is missing in the answer. And I think that just tends to happen a lot with motherhood, is this disappearance of self. And that's not what God wants, right? Like God made each and every one of us purposefully, uniquely, wonderfully. And so like when you become a mother, he doesn't want you to just become like cookie cutter. He wants us to continue to live out the person that he has made us to be. So in that, yes, no clue how I am. You and me both, Nicole. You and me both. But to that point, I thought it was really good to ask questions in the reflection section or discussion guide to help women kind of process those things. Because really what they're saying when they're saying my kid started karate or had the flu or whatever, they're saying I'm stressed out and exhausted, but they just haven't had a moment to process what those other people's lives, how they're affecting them. They've haven't had a second to think about themselves. So I wanted to give moms just a little bit of time to think about themselves and who they are and how they play into the equation. So
love that.
Yeah. Courtney, anything?
I mean, I think you pretty much covered it. I really like your point that you said just now, though, about like when you're a mom, you don't become cookie cutter.
Yeah.
Like you're still you, and you bring whatever skills and gifts and talents you have to motherhood. Like there's not a like one size fits all way to be a mom, which is really why we wanted to make sure this book wasn't like a parenting book, more just a book about how you can find God in whatever your experience of motherhood is.
Yes. And the acquisitions editor, when I was pitching this to her, she brought that up, and she's like, we don't want this to be like a parenting book. And I'm like, thank goodness. I don't either. Like, I am not qualified to give any parenting advice to anyone ever, anywhere. So let's not make this a how-to parenting book.
I think that's such an important point. And one of the reasons Catholic Mom chose this book is that we have moms from every realm, and we have moms who aren't moms, right? We have spiritual moms, we have grandmoms, and we wanted to pick a book that was about motherhood at its core, but it's really a prayer book more than anything. It's a discovering of who we are in God, who God is, how we are his children, and how we parent and kind of interact with people in the world. Like it's all the things. And now that you've mentioned that you were a psych major, it all kind of like that halo should be over me. Like, oh, I get it now.
It's all coming together.
It's all coming together. And before we go any further, since we have so many amazing women joining us, Kelsey, I wanted to give you that opportunity to tell people what special thing you're offering for our question askers. Is that a word?
Oh, yes. So I have this lovely In the Trenches mug here. And I would love to give one away to anybody who, joins us live and asks a question or throws a comment out in the comment box. So that way we can really, fellowship together, because that's what this is really all about. This is what this is meant to be about. So.
Amen. Thank you for that. That's so generous. And so that will be at the end of next week. After you go through the next, so we've been doing it for 3 of the 4. We will do just a random drawing from the comment section. So thank you for that, Kelsey.
My pleasure.
All right. So where are we going next?
Okay. So because women, moms, tend to lose sight of themselves. And for me, I was guilty of that as well, and when I first became a mom, I had these preconceived notions of what like a good mom looks like or does, and how they should talk and act and all the things that they should be good at. And like, weirdly, none of those things was me, like none of those things was my gifts and my strengths. So I was like, man, I must be a terrible mom. Like motherhood plays to all my weaknesses. And so it's kind of like me trying to jam myself the square peg into the round hole and not seeing how it fit. But in this section of who are you, and there's a lot of self-exploration questions at the back, something that I think is really helpful would be to like figure out, well, let's rediscover who I am. And so one of the questions was just to come up with 5 words to describe you. And so, well, let's stop there. Courtney and Allison, let's get to know each other. What are 5 words to describe you?
Courtney, I want you to go first.
Oh, okay. I'm going first.
Yes.
Well, I have a sort of outside the box answer to this.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Very Jesus-y of you.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Yeah. When I was editing these questions in the back of the book, I will admit I did not imagine that I was going to be answering them myself, so I did not take that into account.
We all need to know who we are and to thine own self.
No. Yeah, and I don't know, the idea of just like picking a list of 5 words about myself, like for some reason that just felt like too self-promotional. I was like, oh no, I don't want to do that. So I was like, maybe I could find like a 5-word phrase that describes me instead. And I
Okay,
mean,
Oh,
I'm
you
intrigued.
you just said
very
we had to pick 5 words. You didn't say what format the 5 words had to be in.
Absolutely. This is
So,
why you're an editor, Courtney.
right.
You're
This is
so good
very
with
editor
words.
of you, Courtney. Very editor
thanks.
of you.
I mean, it's going to get more editor of me because the answer that I came up with was a quote from my favorite book.
Okay.
So, yeah, so when I was thinking of, okay, what's a 5-word quote that I could use that feel like really encompasses like my life and my experiences, what I came up with was this quote from what is my all-time favorite novel, which I brought with me today, Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis, another C.S. Lewis reference.
Yes.
Yeah, and so there's a quote in this book that's, "You also shall be Psyche." And I mean, if you haven't read the book, that probably doesn't make sense out of context. But so, short summary, in the book, these words are spoken to the main character, Orwell, by the god in the book who is kind of implied to be the Christian God because it's C.S. Lewis writing. And so basically, what it's about is, so Orwell's sister, Psyche, who she loves more than anything, is like the most beloved thing she can imagine in the entire world to her, is chosen to be married to this god. And so at the end of the book, Orwell realizes that these words that the god speaks to her, that you also shall be or are Psyche, like that means that the god sees her also as just as beautiful and beloved as she sees her sister. And I mean, he sees her like more clearly than she sees herself, more clearly than anybody else in the book describes her. Like that is at the core basically her identity. And so I chose this quote because I feel like, God can tell me my identity more clearly than any 5 words I could come up with about myself. And it probably also says something about me that I chose to answer this question with a book quote, like I said. But I was thinking it kind of works for this book club too, because like obviously I'm not a mom, and just as Orwell and Psyche in the book like don't follow the same path in life, even though I'm not in the same vocation as you guys or as many of the people listening to this, like I've also gotten a lot out of this book club, and I got a lot out of working on In the Trenches. And so it's also just kind of a reminder that like no matter where we are in life or what our path is in life, like we're all traveling toward the same goal. Like we are all beloved of God.
That
Boom.
was beautiful. Thank you,
Boom.
Courtney.
Well, I mean, that's it, ladies. That's the end of book club.
Oh, no.
Nice to see you all.
No, you're just trying to get out of answering the question yourself. No fair.
Seriously. Okay. So just from that, like I can, and I've told Allison this, like when we were first talking about having you join us, just what I know of you, I told Allison, like, Courtney is like the most brilliant literary and theological mind that I have ever come across.
Oh, boy.
And also, she's really fun. So it's
I
like
try.
the best of all worlds. And I think that the way that you just answered that question just proves that to be true.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
You're fun too.
It was all her influences from her youth, I'm pretty
Oh,
sure.
yes, from you group.
Right.
I'm totally kidding. God has just worked miraculous and beautiful things in you. Courtney, that was an amazing, amazing answer. Loved it.
All right, Allison, you're next.
All right, so I'm a very literal person. And so I have literally 5 words. And I have to confess, I wrote them all down. And then I said, I'm not going to change them. And then I changed one. So I had written down fun. But I was thinking that doesn't really describe me as truly how I see myself. I see myself as joyful. Like fun denotes kind of like my behavior, but joyful is kind of my spirit. And I feel like this answer is more of a spirit answer. So I feel like I'm a joyful person, faithful, talented, mended, and squirrely.
Squirrely.
Elaborate
on squirrely.
Okay. So I have ADHD, and one of my best friends, God rest her soul, Lori Lynch, she used to tell me that scene from Up where the dog is like paying attention for like 2 seconds, and he's like, squirrel. She goes, that is you. So she's like, you were such that dog. But instead of calling me a dog, she started to share squirrel things with me all the time.
That's
and
hilarious.
and I'm a social media person. So I kind of noticed that when I shared squirrel things, my social media got interaction. But then I could throw in God things and people didn't unfriend me.
Hooray.
Clever.
But I really am the squirrel girl. Like, I'm all over the place. I lose things left and right. Like, did you know that squirrels lose about 75% of the nuts that they hide? However, that's where we get trees from. So God uses all of our mistakes and our problems or our weaknesses. I think I'll go with weaknesses to bring good in the world. So I'm pretty squirrely.
That's fantastic.
I like it.
I like your squirreliness.
Thank you. Me too. And fun fact, almost all the squirrel things in my house, people have sent me. And my favorite one is a woman sent me rosary beads made out of acorns. That's my favorite.
Whoa.
Is that not the best?
So cool. Wow, you really own this squirrel thing, don't you?
I do. And now that my friend has passed away unexpectedly a couple of years ago, it's even more special to me. So shout out to my good friend Lori. God rest her soul. All right, so I want you to share yours, Kelsey, but I also want to share some of the participants have been sharing those. So let's just pull those up for a minute. So Nicole says, tired, scattered, hungry, confused, and caffeinated. Oh, I feel you, girl.
Solidarity, right here with you.
Mary sharing, I didn't fit into any of the boxes. I'm not a good cook. I don't see or knit, and I'm not organized. However, I love my kids and we made it work together. I have 6 children and everyone is healthy and I'm so thankful for that. Praise God. That is amazing. I love that. I am not a domestic goddess in any way, shape, or form.
I have 0 domestic abilities.
I remember one of my friends was getting married and we had to write a recipe on a card. And so I wrote the phone numbers of all the local restaurants. How I roll. Just a few more and then Lisa, again, founder of Catholic Moms. So happy you've been able to join us, Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
She's beloved by God, loving, hopeful, anxious, and a dreamer. These are beautiful.
Those are great. Thank you all for sharing those. And Mary, I'm just going to tell you that I totally thought that, and I had that preconceived notion of motherhood too, right? Like all the domestic abilities, the cooking, the cleaning, the sewing and stuff. I don't know, all the things that I can't do, right? But instead of like, I don't know, painting a picture of motherhood and trying to jam myself into it, what I realized was, why don't I figure out like who I am and then use that as a framework to build outward from there so that I can kind of live out this call as a mom in an authentic way, like live it out in my own skin, you know, sort of thing. So my 5 words are creative, introspective, energetic, encouraging, and hardworking. Although I do want to steal joyful because I feel like I'm that too. So I cheat. And see, so I have 6 words. We all came about those differently. And this is why I need an editor because I always throw in way too many words and she has to cut them out.
Well, okay, I'm not taking away any of your words that describe you, though. That's not fair.
Fair enough.
I went over word count again, but this time you're letting it happen, so thank you.
That's allowed.
Love that.
But I realized, like, when I started to think back on, like, just different scenes from my motherhood or whatever, like, that those strengths were present, right? And that motherhood wasn't playing to my weaknesses. I mean, there are obviously limitations. I'm not a perfect person. But how we use our strengths, whether we're trying to or not, because that's just who we are, right? And so when I would think back to, like, a really good moment with my kids, I was like, oh, wow. Like that was a very encouraging moment or whatever. And like, I'm watching my kids be built up through my gift of being encouraging or whatever. The fact that this book even came about is because I'm an introspective kind of person and I like to think about things, you know? And so like whether I was realizing it or not, God was using my strengths to build the framework for my motherhood in our little family bubble. So anyways, I thought that was pretty eye-opening when I realized it.
Has anybody shared with you their 5 words? Has anybody shared with you, like, what kind of feedback, I suppose I should word that differently, have you been receiving from people reading the book? Has anybody had reached out? Because I always find that so fascinating how people receive the messages God gave me to share in my writing.
No one has told me their 5 words, but I have had women from all over the world, actually, which has been totally mind-blowing, just reach out to me through social media, direct messages, and just say how they happen to be, I don't know, even just stumble across this book and how it like had this great impact on their motherhood. And that has been like the most, talk about encouraging. That's been like the
Wow.
life-giving thing to hear from your readers. There's somebody once told me, you guys are going to get more than you bargained for, because I'm going to go off on a little tangent, but like writing is kind of like playing a symphony, on like a piano, but you're in the room all alone and the speakers are in a different room. So you're trying to play as best you can, but it's silent. You don't know how other people are hearing it.
Interesting.
And only the people who are in the other room, hear what you're playing. And so to be able to hear from the women, or even men have reached out and been like, hey, you need to stop saying this is just for mom, because I really got a lot out of this too. So it's been really beautiful and life-giving to me to hear from readers, I'll say, about what they are hearing from this book.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what else from this chapter would you like us to dive into? Those questions those 5 words were interesting, and I'm going to write them down in my journal, and I'm going to make a note in my calendar to go back to them periodically to see where God keeps me constant, like that is definitely who I am, and where God is revealing more about who he's created me to be. I think it's really important that we spend time thinking about who we are. It's okay to do that. It's not being egotistical or sinful. Like, God has created us so specially and beautifully, and we should know who we are in him. I love that.
And it's actually like true humility to be able to recognize the gifts that you have, and then also recognize that they are in fact gifts, so that you can give praise to the one who deserves it, the one who gave them to you, right? So yes, by saying that I'm creative, I'm saying God gave me a creative gift because he's awesome, so it's okay to recognize your gifts because God gave them to you, and it's beautiful to thank him for those.
Yes.
But the last thing, if I could, thing that I really liked about this chapter was the concept of who you surround yourself with. Again, I'm a super psyche person. And so, like, I don't know if you've ever heard, we are kind of a sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with. Have you ever heard that?
No, I've never heard that.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, I mean, I think it was started by like this motivational speaker guy. I think his name was Jim Rohn. So I don't even know if he was like a psychologist, but I know he was like a motivational speaker, and he came up with this concept that you are the sum of the 5 people that you spend the most time with, which I think is so spot on. But there have been times in my motherhood when I have not had a, solid community. And it occurred to me that, my community sometimes, I like to read, I like movies, I like all these things. Sometimes our community, we have to remember, like, the movies that we watch, the books that we read, the music that we listen to, that's also part of the community that we're building around ourselves, and they count too. So like, there's actually a word for this, and I don't remember what the word is, but have you guys ever read a novel and then start to like think like the main character, or like live it out almost in a way? There is an actual like word for that, and there's something called ecophenomena, which is like the imitating of other people's actions even without your own awareness of doing it. So for example, I have this really terrible habit of, like, whenever I'm talking to somebody and they have a different accent than I do, I just naturally start to respond in that accent, which is terrible. It's so bad because I am awful at accents, so it just sounds like I'm mocking them, and I'm like, I have to like intentionally like work really hard to speak like myself, you know. But like if I'm starting to talk to somebody with a southern drawl down here in Texas, you know, I like it's bad.
Awesome.
But anyways, that
That's
totally
fabulous.
happens to me, you know, and especially like even with characters and books and stuff that will happen. Like I'm also a huge Hunger Games fanatic. And so like while I was reading the Hunger Games, I would like walk outside and be like, I wonder if that plant is edible, if that would kill me. Like, you know, like and just start to, you know, like thinking all of these things that I never would have thought of before if I hadn't been hanging out with Katniss. So anyways, just to keep in mind that the even the fictional characters that we surround ourselves with have an influence on who we are and who we become. So
that is so fascinating. Like I'm already sitting here thinking about who do I spend time with? Like, I used to be a preschool teacher. That explains a lot about me. I spent hours with like surrounded by very little people who are very joyful. So like, I think that's where my joy comes from.
And also a little squirrely.
Very squirrely. and sometimes crabby, like but very curious. And I think like looking at most of like moms of littles, we're spending lots of time with these little people. And I love that we, you know, obviously we're raising and rearing our children, but quite honestly, I think they raise and rear us at the same time.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
They teach us, they remind us to be curious. They remind us to be in awe of what God has created. They remind us to be joyful and to find the fun in the littlest things. I have a daughter that's special needs, and so she's deaf, and she also has a cognitive disability. And I love looking at the world through her eyes. She finds everything funny. She finds the joy in the simplest things, and she sees the good in everyone. And like that's the eyes of the world that I want to have, that are so jaded by being a grown up, as she'll say grown up deaf, like grown. I feel like I'm not as grown up as I should be. Any thoughts on that, or Courtney, anything about like when you were reading that and when you were, you know, diving into this, like what kind of effect did that have on you as I think as an editor? Do you find that like as you're reading stuff, this starts to have an effect on your own, not just on your own behavior and your own thought process?
Oh, I mean, absolutely. Every book that I edit, it ends up kind of making its way into my head and into my prayer life as I'm working on it. Because I think one thing that's interesting about being an editor that I maybe didn't really expect was just that you have to be really good at understanding other people. Because like when you're editing somebody's work, you know, you want to polish it up, but you also want to make sure that it stays in that person's voice. So I mean, somebody like Kelsey has a very, very strong writing voice. Like you really have a strong sense of self.
Thank you.
So I mean, when I'm editing your work, I'm thinking, okay, like how do we rephrase this in a way that's maybe clearer to the person reading it, but in a way that's still very authentically Kelsey's voice. So yeah, you have to know who you are, but you also have to know who the author is, and you also have to know who your readers are and like what they need from it. Yeah, so I guess there's kind of a psych element a little bit to editing, though I have no psych background whatsoever.
That's really
Go ahead, Kelsey.
I think just by reading, you're giving yourself kind of a psych history. I think because they say like the pen is mightier than the sword, you know, and I think that's because the sword changes somebody from the outside in, but the pen changes somebody from the inside out.
Whoa!
Ooh. Wow! Mic drop. Wow.
So just by reading and, you know, like inputting all of the things that you do, all of the works that you work on is, I think, giving you a good psych background right there.
Cool.
This is, you know, this half an hour goes by way too fast. We are at the end of our time together already. This is crazy. We have.
I wish we could do it all day long. This is so fun.
I know. I'm totally with you. Hey, let's just keep going. Oh wait, I have other things to do. And you probably have kids who want to be fed, right? Oh, life. Why did it get in the way of my fun? Kelsey, what ending thoughts would you like to leave us with for part 3? Who are you?
Yeah. I just want to encourage all moms out there to really live out this vocation in your own skin, because you were made on purpose, right? Everything about you has a meaning. It was intentional. And so it's good. It's what God wills, is for you to lead your kids as yourself, right? Like God gave the kids that he did to you for a reason, and you are the perfect person for those kids. So living out your motherhood in your own skin is maybe one of the most valuable gifts that you could give to them.
Beautiful way to end. We have been talking with Kelsey Gillespy and the editor of In the Trenches, Courtney Saponaro. This is from the Daughters of St. Paul, Pauline Books and Media, pauline.org. Make sure I get all that in there. It's finding God through parenting littles. It's also just finding God. It's so good. We're so thrilled to give you one more week of our beautiful book club, our Catholic Mom Book Club. That will be next Tuesday, 9:30 Eastern. And if you've missed any of the episodes, please go visit catholicmom.com. Click on the media book link there, drop down, can't miss it, and you can get those. We have all of that. And it's also been shared on the Catholic Mom Momcast. It's become our extra content on our podcast. We're so thrilled to be able to join you in that way as well. Kelsey, Courtney, another wonderful week. We look forward to spending next Tuesday, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time with you again.
I can't wait.
And thank you all again for joining us. God bless and have an amazing week.